Last time I said something in passing. I was in the midst of working our way through the various areas, domains that couples have to resolve their differences in, negotiate settlements of, find compromises in. There were a large number of different domains. And I kept saying, there is an extra one I am forgetting. And I said, as soon as I stop this presentation today, I will remember what that is. And of course, as soon as I stop the presentation, I remembered that one. So let me bring that up. That is the additional remaining element of understanding between the two people who are hoping to make a partnership with each other that has to be resolved in order for that partnership to take place in an effective and hopefully a reasonably enduring fashion. That is working out rituals of who is responsible for what. In any life, there's a lot of what's called scut work, colloquially, that we have to engage in. Cleaning bathrooms, taking out trash, cooking, doing dishes, going to the market, going to the cleaner, getting cars serviced, paying checks, writing checks, opening the mail, on and on and on. I've never tried to tally up what all the separate tasks are, but it's a fairly large number. Uh, each of the two people who are hoping to become a couple have been used to having somebody else take care of one or another or more of those, or doing it themselves in a certain way. And they have rituals for taking care of these rituals. And it's different for each of them. And now they come together. So, uh, what's going to happen for meals? We have to eat. Who's going to be the person responsible for that? Are we going to take turns cooking? Are we going to get food sent in? All these things have to be resolved so that it just flows. The systems are in place that supports the two lives that are taking place there. And very often, one or another, there's bitterness in one or the other. One of the members of the pair thinks that the other is not typically doing as much as he or she should be doing, and that they're being exploited or taken advantage of. Also, there are different standards. I like my place very tidy, and he keeps leaving things all around. He says, "Oh my God, compared to how I live when I'm alone, this is I pick up almost everything. I forget once in a while, but that's too much for her." So they bump into each other because their standards of how to do things are different. As in addition to who should be the one responsible for that thing. So I've developed over the years, when I'm bumping into this in the consulting room, I've developed a few things that seem to be helpful ways to get the clients to address this kind of out of syncness between the two of them. One is to say, you guys should start all over again. Take some 3x5 cards, write down every one of the things that has to go on in your coupledom in order for all that needs to be taken care of to be taken care of. Put them out on a table so that all of, I don't know how many, they're going to be 15, 30, 40 things that have to be done in your relationship. Spread them out and then take turns. Flip a coin who goes first, and the first person who goes picks the first card. It's the thing that they enjoy the doing the most or is the most important to them. They have some ritual for why they're picking that card. The other person should just respect that. Then the other person goes next and takes the second card. And you keep doing it until all of it's done. Now, in addition to deciding who's going to be responsible, there should probably be a time certain by which it's going to be done. If the trash has to go out, when are the barrels going to be picked up? Does it have to go out on a certain morning? It's to be done by then. If shopping in the market is going to be done, when is the best time to do it? What time of the week? Should there be two shopping trips? One, you have to figure out when it's to be done too, because then each of you has to hold the other accountable for doing the things you've agreed to do and to do them within the time frame that you agreed to would be the time frame for taking care of that function. That seems to help. In addition, I say you could also follow a different kind of ritual about some of the things. The person for whom this is the most picky and the most important should be the one who's responsible for doing it, because they won't tell the other person that the other person is fucking up over and over again, because the other person has looser standards. So let the person with the meticulous standards be responsible for doing something. If you can't stand worrying about late bill payments, the one of you who can't stand waiting for late bill payments should write the checks the day the bill arrives. You should be responsible for writing the check to make sure the bill gets paid. So you don't have to, out of fear, keep asking your partner who's supposed to write the bill. Did you write the bills yet? Did you write the bills yet? Which ones are due? And stay away from having to worry about that. You pay the bills and do it on a ritual that makes you feel comfortable. So those are the two particular things I think can be done to help that. And every once in a while, as circumstances change, if somebody gets to be busier, they're on extra shifts at work, or they have a new job and they can't get off work as easily or as often, you may have to rebalance the whole system. That's grounds for saying, I can't do as much as I used to. You have a right to ask to renegotiate. I need to put down some of the things that I've been doing, and could you take over X, Y, and Z? Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's permanent, but that has to be worked out by agreement between the two of you. So nobody should feel like they're going up the hill with too heavy a pack while their partner has a very light pack and is very lackadaisical about what's in that pack. Whew. Okay, that was the last one. I shall then move on. What am I going to? I'm going to try and find a handout, and I'll see if I screw up screen sharing. Oh, it looks like they're all sitting there. I just have to find the right one. Yeah, here it is. Nope, that didn't work. And now I seem to have logged out of what I'm doing here. I don't have the right screen sharing. What do I do now? I'm going to stop screen sharing and try again. What the hell? Oh, there it is. It was hiding. It was there. Yes. Here's my handout. That's where we wound up last time. We were on stage 2, securing intimate relatedness. I ran through on the right-hand column A, the formation of the intimate systems. And I added today the one about taking care of all the support functions that have to go on. Now we need to talk about B. Remember how this gets used. The left-hand column is the name of what the challenge is. The middle column is what has to take place in order for this transition to be successfully addressed. In this case, commitment to the new system. The commitment has to be in all the parts that I mentioned. And finally, A and B, the right-hand column, are things that will come up in the conversations between the party and in the conversations between the therapist and the couple in order to facilitate what has to happen. So I've gone fully full formulation of the intimate system. I have not yet talked about realignment of relationships with extended families and friends to include significant other or others. We still remain attached in many ways to our family of origin, even after we've left home. There's a lot of common sense parlance talked about the empty nest syndrome, where the child or children have left home and now the parents are left alone together. It's not an entirely a correct perception of what is happening. The child may have left home, but unless something strange is going on, the child has not cut off his or her relationship with the people who are still at home. It's only been stretched. It's not as intense. They see each other less frequently, but the child is still coming in and out of the house and meeting with the parents and meeting with siblings if there are siblings on occasions. And what isn't ever talked about is the child who's left home now starts bringing new people into the home. Uh, if the child is in a traditional on a traditional pathway, the child is looking for a mate, and the child has people that he or she starts to date, and they bring them by the family, and the family has to sit with them and get to know them and welcome them, and then maybe lose them because the relationship breaks up, and the family goes through the trying on of potential mates for the one who's now living outside the home. And in addition, there are new friendships being made that didn't exist before, and often the child comes visiting with one or another new friends. So the family of origin is being enriched with a new cast of characters. There's maybe a lot of them, maybe only a few of them. And eventually, if a marriage is made, the clan is now expanded. There's not only the family of origin, but the family of origin becomes connected through marriage with the in-laws. And the unfortunate part of being a parent, I'm laughing at myself, is you don't get to choose who the new friends are that are being brought home or who your in-laws are going to wind up being. It's really quite an enterprise of what diplomacy, patience, kindness, respect towards your child. uh, you have to trust them to muddle their way through it. If they want advice, you give them advice, but you don't give them unsolicited advice. And they may wind up hooking you up in some systematic fashion with people you don't like at all. I've been cursed. Some of them, so I've had a set of in laws in my life. Fortunately, they're both dead now, that I haven't enjoyed at all. And at a few times a year, they would come and visit. They would expect us to go out to dinner with them and be pleasant. And my wife and I would just have to grit our teeth and do as best we can to entertain them, be with them because it was important to our kids. And I detested them. I didn't like them at all. I was luckier with the other set of in-laws that I inherited. I do enjoy the pleasure of their company, and my life's been enriched because they've been brought into me to know me. But you can't count on that at all. I've had friends brought home who I found to be irritating twits, and I had to smile and be pleasant and have them at the dinner table and try and figure out things to talk to them about. So you, your diplomatic glands get challenged by this principle, and the family has to be permeable and stretchable. It's realignment of relationships with the extended families. Yes, the family has to realign itself, has to make room for the younger people who have moved out to bring these new people in and incorporate them somehow without making a big fuss out of it. Oh, the classic fuss is you're going to marry a black person, you're dead. You're not a member of this family anymore. The hostile cutoff is not usually a good way of trying to manage this realignment. But the family has to become permeable in ways it hasn't been up until now, and make some accommodation to what the growing connections are being entered into by the person who's left home. I think that takes care of the main things I want to say about B. You'll have interesting conversations with clients about these topics. I think, therefore, I'm going to leave this handout and go somewhere else. I'll see if I can pull up another one. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to start it again. Yes, it does go to where I wanted it to go. How wonderful. There it is peeking out. I think I have to get some way. What do? I have to move this out of the way. Oops. I have to grab this and move it. No, that doesn't work. Aaron, could you turn your mic on a second? Maybe you know.
Yeah, I'm only seeing like the left-hand
I
sliver of
know.
the,
Do you know how I can turn off the three pictures at the top? There's me talking, or move it somewhere else.
um, you can see all three of us right now?
Yes, I'm
Uh,
here. Scott's in the
okay.
middle.
There should be like a plus and minus over the pictures. Push the minus sign. Is there that? Do you see that
Oh,
on
yes,
yours?
that worked. Thank you. Now I can pull up now you should be able to see my handout.
Yeah, exactly. Because what I see, I have it minimized, so I only see you when you're talking right now. When a handout comes up.
Oh, wait, this is not the one I want. I have to put this back and get one of the others. Oh, God.
That looks good.
Yeah, but it's not the one I want. This is not the one I want. Ah, here it is. I found it. There. Individual life cycle stages. Is that what
What's
you
up?
say?
I see epigenetic theory and some possible intervention paradigms.
No, you don't see you don't see my individual life cycle stages.
No.
All right, let me go back, go out and come back again. Is it there now?
Yes. Individual life cycle.
Hooray!
Very good.
Yes, hooray! We solved the problem.
Hmm.
Clumsy. Okay, you can mute yourself again if you want. We have been working from the standpoint of individual life cycles challenges. There's great overlap between family life cycle theory and individual life cycle theory. The first stage after leaving home, and let me again point out this line that goes across and then up from identity versus role confusion, which unfolds during adolescence, to the line going to the left and then up is the line of emancipation. And then the next stage is intimacy versus isolation. That's not only a thing that the family has to adapt to, but the individual has to decide on his or her pattern of relatedness. What's it going to be? Serial monogamy, marriage, uh, group living, swinging, open marriage. Somehow, the pattern that best fits the individual has to be worked out. And all of us need to have some enduring, continuing, and trustworthy patterns of intimacy available to us, or we suffer a lot and get into trouble. And the Erikson's negative pole is isolation. If we wind up with too hermit-like life, we're going to be in great difficulty. Uh, I think, yes, I will continue with this chart for a while. I think when I first introduced it, I mentioned that for the upper stages, the ones that unfold after emancipation and in autonomous adult life, uh, if you find a client coming in who seems to be wounded or struggling or stuck in one of the upper stages, let's take the one we've been working on. seems to have trouble forming and maintaining any kind of reasonable pattern of intimate relatedness, is alone a good deal of the time, is lonely a good deal of the time, is disconnected from most members of the human race almost all the time, is floundering there, seems to have hit a wall. The most common thing you should think of is twofold. You must ask yourself, has something gone wrong at the preceding stage, identity versus role confusion in this case, or there are foundational stages underneath. This is like a staircase. So the foundational stage underneath this one is the very first entry into life, what Erikson labels trust versus mistrust. And this feels quite beautiful to me. If the way we were welcomed into the world, making the transition out of the womb and into human bonds and human connectedness, went awry or was not managed well, so that the presence of human beings is scary or challenging or disruptive or signals danger rather than trust and surrender, then the lingering after effects of that wounding that took place early in life are going to show up again when the challenge is to start building one's own intimate relationships with new people outside of the family members. So I think I'm going to go in the following fashion then. I will talk about I've talked a lot about identity formation. I've talked about the challenges of putting together a good identity rather than winding up in role confusion as adolescence comes to an end. But I will now talk about, what does Erikson mean by trust versus mistrust? What is needed, and we'll talk about good enough parenting later for this stage, but what is needed for the infant during this era? Uh, if you want me to put a time frame on it starts, maybe it even starts in the last trimester of pregnancy. I don't know for sure. I know that women who are expectant carry on fantasy relationships with their fetus after it begins to kick and move, and it starts to have in their minds a personality and an identity, the beginnings of an identity, and they often daydream about interacting with it. I think maybe if that's going in a pleasant way and they're not frightened, the womb is a happier place for the fetus. And so maybe what the child needs in order to prepare for being born starts in the last trimester of the pregnancy. I don't know for sure. I certainly know after the child is born, uh, there are critical things that can go wrong that are very harmful to the young developing child. We must all accept the fact that of all the known living organisms on the planet, the human organism may be born in the biggest state of unpreparedness for life of anything else. Horses, for instance, as huge as they are, can get up, start walking, and start beginning the process of learning how to forage for themselves within some hours of having been born. Uh, amoebas just simply divide, and both amoebas are adult at the time the division is completed. We are terribly frail, fragile, and helpless for a long period of time. Our first thrusts into autonomy don't really start until later in the first year. It takes a long time for the child to be more than a almost totally dependent organism. Uh, all right, I'll give credit to Harvey Karp. He's a very difficult person, and he's an anti-vaxxer, so I don't like him for that. But he's a very creative pediatrician who's on faculty, was on faculty, and he had a theory about the birth of human beings into what he calls, he labels every birth of human beings at about 9 months or so as being premature birth. he thinks we would all be much better off if we were not born until after another trimester, until after we were born at 3 months of age as young people. We should be in the womb for 12 months. If we could be in the womb for 12 months, the human race would start off and there would be less difficulty in a better fashion. But we cannot. We are victims of certain realities of our frame and our size. The human head, the brain is developing at a very rapid rate later in pregnancy. And in order for it to be more capable of greater autonomy and less distress and being able to master what the, the the headache of having been born in a more effective way would require is the human head would have to be a lot larger because the human brain would be a lot larger. And unfortunately, if the human brain were as big as it is 3 months after birth, it would never be able to come down the birth canal, and the woman would be in serious trouble. Both the mother and child would die. This is before cesarean was invented. I suppose we could somehow overcome biology and keep interfering with the pulsations of birth and stick the child in the womb for that would be a horrible process. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work to have a head that large. It doesn't work to try to interfere with birth. We have to surrender to the natural order of things as they've evolved evolutionarily, and we have to let birth happen at or around 9 months of age. We even induce labor for people who are taking too much longer than that to get on with the business. And we have to put up with the frailty and the total passivity and lack of any capacity to do much in the newborn infant. Can't even control its own head. Its head flops helplessly around. It has to be supported if we pick them up and carry them. Uh, so, what is characteristic of that new birth? Uh, where do I want to go? I'm at a fork in the road, and as Yogi Berra used to say, if you come to a fork, take it. I think I will talk some about the plight of the parents as they move towards this wonderful event, the birth of their first child. Uh, Culture creates trouble for people. In this case, I think we create trouble for the people who are the expectant fathers in many ways. First of all, culture creates trouble because people have been nagging them to get pregnant. Uh, while more people are choosing not to, it still runs counter to what the culture seems to require. Be fruitful, go forth, and multiply. So, parents who say voluntarily, when asked, when are you going to get pregnant or when are you going to make me a grandparent, who say the truth, we're never going to get pregnant. We think life is better without children. They have to be prepared to put up with a ration of shit and with being stigmatized to some degree. And I cannot believe the number of my peers who are in the older generation who actually act like they're entitled to tell their children that their children owe them grandchildren. No, their children don't owe them grandchildren. Grandchildren is not a gift that's owed by the younger generation to the older generation. Having grandchildren should be a very serious discussion between the people who are deciding to do that, and should not be entered into easily. And it should be entered into with eyes open, which they never are. I don't think we have any adequate tools by which we prepare expectant parents to become parents. That's not built into our culture at all. As a matter of fact, since we aren't into intergenerational living very much, or into several families sharing a common space very much, we prize separateness and privacy. There are many young women who give birth to children and they've never even held an infant before in their life, and suddenly one is thrust upon them. In addition, we not only expect them to do this task and to live through it, we expect them to be radiantly happy. This should be a wonderful time. They should be exuding steadfastness and good feeling and great excitement and happiness that, yes, the pregnancy has happened and it's unfolding now, and we're going to become parents. Isn't it wonderful? But like everything else, there is a shadow side to being pregnant and to giving birth and having a child. And because of our culture, we stigmatize, we give people feelings of stigma if they spend time visiting the dark shadow side that they're going through because they're pregnant and going to give birth to a child. What kinds of things do they go through? It's different for, well, there's overlap for the man and for the father and the mother, but there are differences too. I'll start with the pregnant mother. She may be having a lot of different kinds of physiological distress. Uh, Morning sickness, this is a terrible irony of fate. Morning sickness seems to be stronger in women whose hormones are very robust and whose hormones are supporting the pregnancy even better than other women are. That seems to be correlated with morning sickness for some reason. And it's not unusual for women to have trouble eating, fear eating, eat only a few strange things. One of my daughters would only eat mashed potatoes. Let's see, what was on her oatmeal, mashed potatoes, and a few other things, or she would have waves of horrible nausea. She tried to choke anything else down. Fortunately, she didn't vomit a lot, but some women actually vomit a lot in addition to having nausea. So they have trouble holding down and keeping down a nutritious repast for themselves and taking proper nutritional care of their own child. In addition, stretch marks may be characteristic of the growing distension of the abdomen. It's not uncommon for women who are pregnant to get hemorrhoids. Uh, those are the main features. Now, there's lots of, breasts start to sag and become more pendulous as they prepare themselves to become milk factories. And there's probably not a woman alive who isn't alarmed with the changing of their bodies, worried that they're going to the distended, sagging breasts, hemorrhoids, stretch marks are going to be a permanent part of them. That they're going to look older. They're not going to look like attractive, hot babes to their husbands anymore, and they're frightened that this is going to have a negative effect on their capacity to have wonderful erotic experiences with their husband. They're somehow aging into a whole other generation. They're going to have a different looking body, and they're not going to be found nearly as appealing anymore by their husbands. In addition to those things, here's something they struggle with that's shared with their husbands. Husbands go through this too, or fathers of the children if they're not legally married. Uh, is this kid going to be born an idiot? Is it going to have birth defects? Is it going to inherit my father's terrible temper? Is this going to be a temper ridden child? I have a psychotic uncle. Is my child going to be psychotic? There's lots of, is it going to be born with all its organs intact? Is it going to have some strange organ defect that I've conceived? And it's going to be require a lot of surgeries, or it's going to be without one limb for the rest of its life, and I'm going to have a special needs child. There's all kinds of fears about the intactness of the child to come. And the father is going through that kind of fear too. Uh, Parents usually are kind towards each other. Often they just suffer in silence. They don't want to talk to their partner. They don't want to be a bummer or a downer for their partner. So they'll suffer in silence and not talk to anybody about their growing fears. Uh, oh, what's labor going to be like? Am I going to have a cesarean? Is it going to be unbearable? Will I be able to stand into the pain? Will there be some kind of complications of labor that aren't anticipated? Will I have to go in for some kind of emergency surgery? Uh, is the baby going to be born stillborn? Uh, am I going to have a miscarriage? On and on and on. There are a million fears. There are a million worries. Fortunately, we have testing techniques for some of these things now. So amniocentesis testing is done, and a lot of ultrasound visits to the developing fetus are being made, and some of the fears are laid to rest, but there are no tests for some things, and some fears cannot be laid to rest. Is this child going to be a hemophiliac? You can do, I suppose, invasive tests of many kinds of things, but it's at some risk to the pregnancy. So only the most ordinary things are routinely tested for, unless there's some reason to do specialized tests, which pose a risk to the ongoing march of the pregnancy. Uh, uh, Husbands now, I will turn to, have their own miseries. uh, Increasingly they feel an unspoken or spoken imperative coming from the woman. She can no longer be the same as she has been in their relationship. She is now being increasingly preoccupied with and not feeling up to doing all the things she used to do. And here is the resorting of the chores and functions in the household. It starts even when the pregnancy is oncoming. The male in the family has to take over more responsibilities and begins to feel more burden than he has to. He senses intuitively, if he's not already being instructed by the mother, that he needs to take on a support role for her. He needs to be more comforting. He needs to be more present. He needs to be around more. He needs to soothe her when she gets jangled. Uh, he's learning that becoming a father means being relegated into a support role. He's not an equal partner. He has to sit on some of his needs, some of his longings, put them to one side so he can be a good, cheerful, and supportive husband and a part time caretaker after the baby is born. He does not matter nearly as much. And now I will tell you a very sad statistic. 20% of first time fathers either A, go to a prostitute, B, have a one night stand, or C, actually have a mistress during the unfolding of the pregnancy. And if you want to think about something devastated and devastating to show up in your office, it's a couple where this has happened. The wife has found out and she is beside herself. The person she turned to give her support and to be there at the time of the greatest challenge she's ever known in her life has been busy with some other woman. It is just miserable to work with. My heart goes out to everybody in that scenario. It is terrible. They're in agony after the disclosure, and rightfully so. In addition, by the third trimester, the wife may try to continue being a reasonable sexual partner to her husband, maybe only sometimes masturbating him or giving him oral sex, but trying within her limits to understand for many males, the signal of whether they're cared about is whether the woman is willing to be sexual with them, even though that has nothing to do with whether she may care about them or not. So the woman tries to deliver that message, that voice of love through the sexual encounter. It becomes harder for her to do in the third trimester, and since she's either going to have a hysterectomy or an episiotomy, where her labia are sliced, help the baby, but she's not going to feel certainly, and a lot of sleep deprivation. She's certainly not going to feel very sensual are very much like she would like to fuck after the baby is born. It's going to take an extended period of time for that to even happen spontaneously. And it's certainly going to take a period of time for her to want to do something sexual because she wants to be kind to her husband. She will be totally consumed with her life and the life of the baby. And the husband is going to be in the support role. Now, the restarting of sexual behavior between the two of them is a delicate thing that we therapists can try to manage and talk about and work out if we have a couple who's willing to talk about such things with us. But there is a secret that many husbands have that they don't want to acknowledge or even talk to the therapist about. Every expectant father is about to be transformed into being a motherfucker, something that's said as a curse between males. But he's no longer going to be making love to a woman who is not a mother. And there is an incestuous tinge to this. He is going to be fucking a mother. She's going to be lactating probably during the early stages of his attempting to have sex with her. She has a child. She is the mother of a child. He's fucking somebody who's become a mother. There's going to be a hesitancy, a slight pall cast over the whole thing in the best of circumstances. And for some men who are vulnerable in this area, it becomes hard, really hard for them to resume any normal sexual life again. They prefer virgins, or they at least prefer women who are never had children. That's more erotically arousing and feels more comfortable for them than any woman who has a child to be responsible for. And that, unfortunately, is a given of the circumstances. All right, I've talked about the challenges that lay upon the expected couple. Oh, there's the last one. uh, the the mother truly gets very involved with the child towards the end of the pregnancy, not only in daydreams, but I think there is a nesting instinct. She wants to decorate the nursery. She's consumed with what are the clothes the baby is going to be dressed in and needs. How many diapers should she get? What accessories should she get? Where's the baby going to sleep? Are they going to bring the baby into bed with them at night? They're going to have one of those co-sleepers that stick out for the bed, so the baby is readily available to her. On and on, nesting problems, and she wants her husband to be as enthusiastic and as involved in the nesting that has to take place as she is, and he really rarely is. He fakes it most of the time. All right, the baby comes. The baby is very dependent. Uh, There is only one dependent reflex in the baby. The baby's arms flail, the baby's legs flail, the baby's head flails. The baby can't control anything except one thing, the sucking reflex. You put anything in the baby's mouth and the baby will start sucking on it. Thank God we would have become extinct if it weren't the sucking reflex, if that weren't dependable and in place. So the mother child dance begins because it's the mother who has the milk. Now, a kind father can spell the mother. It's possible to pump breasts and to give the baby a bottle rather than the breast. And fathers can, when the mother is exhausted, can take over some of the night feedings if the father is able to get some sleep at other times and be self-sacrificing and very noble and start to be the feeder of the early feeder of the child as well as the mother. But the primary responsibility is going to go to the mother. And within a short period of time, something else starts to happen along with the locking into the breast and sucking like crazy. Eyes start fixating on the mother. The baby starts sending eyes, controlling eyes, and the eyes are there looking at the shape of the mother, hovering over him or her, and the eyes start fixating on the mother's face. And I had a psychopathology professor who once said to us, the baby learns to start drinking in the mother with his or her eyes as well as with the mouth. And that's a very important basis for building the steps to come on. Uh, that powerful attachment. Finally, feeling skin sensations and feeling the warmth and presence of the mother through the skin envelope comes soon after as the third thing that happens fairly early in life. And that remains fairly static. Not much is happening. The child has been born into a state that Freud calls primary narcissism. The child has no sense that the child is a child. The child's streaming of consciousness, whatever is being experienced, is the entire universe. That's all there is. The child is capable of knowing that it feels at one with the universe. What's going on feels good, warm, sustaining, or what's going on is not good. And the child flails and the child cries. So the task of the parent or parents is very simple. For many weeks to come, it's simply to recreate womb like conditions. In the womb, there was not distress unless something physiologically very bad was going on. The baby, too, was in the state of primary narcissism, didn't have to forage for food. Food was provided through the umbilical cord. The child was jostled by the mother's walking around. That felt good. That jiggling felt good to the child. It was not frightening to the child. The child was in a uh, low light circumstance. There's some talk that it's not entirely totally dark in the womb. There's some low light that manages to penetrate. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But uh, and there are sounds. There are lots of sounds in the womb. There's the 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 mother's digestive sounds. There are sounds from the external environment penetrate into the womb. It's not a silent place. We make a idiotic mistake. We take newborns and we give them to nap, and we want to make it silent and private in there. That's not what they're used to. That's not recreating womb-like conditions. And I'm going to get back to Harvey Karp in a few seconds because he has some very wise counsel about soothing babies and recreating womb like conditions for them. That is all that needs to be done. Anybody can do it. This is a good time if parents are exhausted, if they have any kind person who's capable of rocking a child, feeding a child with formula, with bottles temporarily, and letting the parents off duty. The parents can be out of the house for a period of hours or even overnight if they're courageous enough to do it. Unfortunately, newborn parents tend to be very frightened. They've worried that things are going to go wrong. They want to make sure the baby's okay. It's hard for them to trust anybody else to take care of the baby. But that's a time when they can separate without doing any distress to the developing psyche of a baby. So I try and encourage the parents of newborns, to be gone at least for a few hours, several times a week, and take a chance on it, and do adult things, and nourish the other parts of themselves. Go off duty. If they want to go to a hotel just because they need a nap, or go to somebody else's house and take a nap, that would be wonderful. They're sleep deprived, but they can leave and let somebody else take care of the baby. Harvey Karp has a book called The Happiest Baby on the Block and a DVD that goes with it that teaches newborn children how to soothe babies. Babies are going to get distressed when they're uncomfortable. You must respond as quickly as possible. You want them to get back comfortable as soon as possible. It still hurts when I think about it. My mother was taught to let me alone for 4 hours, to leave me alone in the crib for that period of time. Didn't matter whether I was screaming in terror, crying for food, had a full diaper, nothing. She was not to respond to me. It would spoil me if she responded to me. Do not do that. It is time to be totally indulgent. You cannot spoil a newborn born child. So first of all, Harvey Karp suggested that they be wrapped in a blanket, that they be cocooned in a blanket. He likes papoose carriers that are available to carry on the woman's chest at all hours, and they can even sleep there with a woman walking around. It's very similar to what went on in the womb. So keep it going until the child is at least coming up on the fourth month birthday before you stop cocooning the child in that way. They should be pinned. Their arms should be pinned at their sides. Their legs should be inside the cocoon. They should not be able to move their limbs and flail around with them, because that is an anxiety provoking thing if that starts. They're used to being in the womb where they can't move their arms and legs. Not very much, only a little. In addition, change their diapers and feed them as often as you can and whenever you need to. If they're cranky and have a hard time falling back to sleep when they've been fed and when they've been changed, there are a variety of techniques he had. First of all, get a rocking swing. Put them in a rocking swing. And there can be lots of noise. Get a white noise broadcaster and let them rock themselves to sleep in a rocking swing, or you rock them to sleep. Uh, there is a way to hold them on their side. They're more comfortable if they're on their side than if they're flat on their back or on their belly. If you side hold them and sort of rock them a little bit in your lap while you're doing that, they'll go to sleep. Finally, you can make shushing noises in their ear. You can bend over them and go shh. That is not upsetting to them. That will often turn off the panic alarm and put them back to sleep. He has all these wonderful things you can do to get them comfortable again if they're having trouble being comfortable. So they can indeed be the happiest baby on the block. So this goes on essentially unchanged. After a while, solid food is put in the diet. After a while, they sleep longer. They leave you alone more. By about 4 months, a new phenomenon is happening. They smile when a human being shows up. Oh my God, my kid knows me. How wonderful. No, they don't know you. You can show them a mask. You can show them a picture of a human race, and that evokes the smile response. They are programmed to start rewarding you to attend to them without any conscious effort on their part. They signal to you with the smile they're happy you're alive and you're there. But they're still in primary narcissism. They don't understand that they have any agency, that they're doing anything. It's all instinctual and wired into them. And they're not making anything that's like a conscious choice. If they refuse to stop crying, it's because you're failing to find the turn off button, not because they're rebellious and defying you and need to be punished. God. But somewhere around age 6 months, a very significant change happens. The British School of Psychoanalysis has done the most research on it, and they call it the eighth month anxiety. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if they're not noticing things, or kids in Britain are retarded in some ways. Gee, from my experience with infants and newborns, this kind of anxiety can show up in a well-wired child, a precocious child, one who's designed to be intelligent. That panic attack shows up at age 6 months of age. You have to be prepared for its arrival. It may not show up until 8 months, but it may show up at 6 months, and it is a panic attack. They suddenly have realized that they're a they and you are a you, and they are utterly dependent. There is this thing that shows up And the thing is distinguishable from other things. It has a different face than other faces. It has a different shape face. And that thing is the thing that gives me the breast. That thing is the thing that rocks me. Now they begin to know different people. And the disappearance of the primary caretaker at a time that they don't feel ready to endure separation and apartness will panic them and they'll shriek with distress. This is the time that new games are very, very welcome. This is the time that object constancy needs to begin to be encouraged and taught. Namely, if something disappears, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. Things can disappear and come back again, and disappear and come back again. And you don't have to get panicked every time it disappears. So kids start liking playing peekaboo. It's a fun game. Mom covers her face disappears, takes the hands away, and the face is back. The kids start giggling with delight as you play that game. You can play peekaboo around a door frame, disappear and come back and let them see the rest of you. These are wonderful ways that the children are learning it's okay. You're still there. You haven't disappeared. You still exist. And even though they're not in distress now, if they come into distress, you'll be back in a moment and the distress will be taken care of. The rituals of attachment and separation, individuation and apartness begin to be taught in play somewhere on the other side of 6 months of age. And I think I will stop at that point because my time is coming up and I will go out of screen sharing again. Yes, you can unmute. Boy, I was talking a mile a minute. I get wound up.
Arthur, I have a,
I have a final comment. I keep
okay.
telling myself in between, you, you may die before you get finished, but it's probably not going to be soon. Why don't you just slow down and go at a more leisurely pace? You're making people dizzy with the rate at which it's pouring out of you. So, okay, I'm ready.
I have a comment and a question, which are not necessarily on the same topic, but
That's fine.
the comment was that my wife, for all three of my children, was a card-carrying member of the La Leche League,
Yes.
and what she utilized for, and it was like almost like her best friend, was a thing called the sling.
Ye-
And the sling was attached to her body, and you put the baby in the sling, and in some ways it was almost as if the sling was a natural appendage,
Yes.
to her body, and then that's how the child was for wherever she went. She had a sling.
Yes. That was very good when each of your children was very, very small.
The other thing that I wanted to kind of question, and I think I brought it up the other times in terms of like when you were talking about uh, isolation and or kind of the striving towards intimacy. What
Yes.
what about the person, the individual, who instead of striving towards or looking for intimacy or searching for intimacy, ends up looking and choosing isolation,
Yeah.
and is entirely against intimacy? Is that something that we can certainly help with a transition towards, rather than looking at as pathological?
Absolutely. Putting together two things, what I talked about last time and talked about this time. First of all, there's probably problems in two areas of life. There's probably something that's gone awry with identity formation because having a solid, stable, and worthwhile identity for ourselves is an important ingredient of feeling safe enough to become vulnerable and allowing another human being to matter to us. have to be able to hear our own voice clearly and feel like we know where we stand in the world, what's good for us and what isn't good for us. So identity formation has to coalesce to some reasonable degree in order to take the risk. Because the most dangerous thing I think any human being could do is to allow another human being to matter to them. That gives such power to hurt and to exploit and to do terrible things to the other person. But I also said today, the foundational stage, the one I'm talking about now too, has probably gotten screwed up in some way. And I'm only beginning to talk about what should happen in that stage. I will talk next time probably about good enough parenting during that stage, what parents have to do to support the child to being able to move out of that stage and to trust and optimism rather than being in mistrust, which is what's happening to the person who's an adult, still is stuck in the mistrust of the first stage and has been wounded in the first stage. What, and therefore, I'll pull out the other document. What can therapists do in the consulting room that starts to repair the badness that happened in the very first stage of life?
Mhm, mhm.
I promise you I will fulfill that. And that's the question I asked you guys. Do you think what I'm trying to present is helpful for therapists to understand and think about these developmental wounds and the imperatives? Because I believe it's what we should be focused on, not a lot of the things that we're taught in graduate school.
Yeah, no, this is my first pass with this particular perspective. So I know that oftentimes in the middle of a session, it might not be what I'm thinking about, but when I find myself a bit stuck, when I can't quite conceptualize something, I'll oftentimes drop back to that model to try to kind of get a bigger, more meta picture of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, where is the wound and how can I address that wound? Something went off the tracks earlier and the person's still stuck now.
It's
Yeah.
it, it's always helpful to find a destination if you have a map.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to provide.
Mhm.
And in my practical experience, I also see people in different places too. I don't feel it's quite as um, stepwise all the time. That sometimes people have multiple areas where they've made some progress, but not
Oh
completely
yeah,
finished.
yeah.
And
There are people who are wounded everywhere.
yeah, yeah, almost like I think Freud used to say that there will be battles through your life and development, and at each point, if it's not quite settled, you have to leave troops behind to kind of keep it under
Yes,
control, and
yes.
and you don't really have the resources in the army for the next thing.
That's
And
right. And eventually, forward progress stops because there's no more resources for there.
yeah, yeah. And also, I think it is really important to, and I don't even know if it's possible, to prepare new parents for the possible or for what they're about to go through with the baby coming. It is one of those things in life that you truly have to live through to appreciate, at least in my personal experience. And then in the experience of the times when I've had new parents sit in my office, terrified about what they'd done.
Uh, there is a wonderful part of being a parent, though. Uh, we revisit all our own wounding and all the bad parenting we got as we unfold as parents. And I think it gives us a change. It softens us, breaks us open again. It gives us a chance to rework ourselves as we're raising our children. If we can be a much better parent to our child than the parent we had, I think the wounds we're carrying heal to some degree as a result of being able to do that.
Yeah.
It's always a striving.
Becoming a new parent and near death experiences are the only two things I know for sure breaks open the personality in some ways and allows for a reorganization room for reorganization to take place.
Hmm. I'll have to find a third.
There may be a third. Why? You've
Uh,
been through new parenthood.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good one. I'm
yeah,
not, it does work. I don't really want to try near death. I
yeah. Try
feel
to
like there must, there must be some
s-
ecstatic experience.
stay away from those.
I wonder if going to one of those weightlessness tanks a lot would do it.
I've done that. I did the isolation tank,
Yeah, the isolation tank.
sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be an hour. I really quite liked it. I think I was in there for 2.5 hours. And the guy helped me out. Yeah, if that's what death is like, count me in. It's fantastic. Very, very calming. So yeah, no, I think there are experiences that can perhaps be achieved around that area, separate from near death or things like that.
I might look at it as a near death in terms of my experience with kind of claustrophobia.
Oh yeah, you would. You would hate it in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's luckily now the modern ones, it's almost like a large closet, if you could imagine, like a walk-in closet, and there's about 6 inches of water. So you can stand up in there and everything, but the water is warm. And even with the ventilation, I do, and I'm not a claustrophobic person per se, but I do remember the first, maybe, who knows, I wasn't wearing a watch, but it felt like the first 5 minutes or so of adjusting and being in that darkness and quiet. And then the humidity level was a little, I could see someone getting anxious.
Oh, I think of two more things now that can break the personality open and maybe prevent bad behavior and open up the possibilities of something better. Probably there are psychedelic experiences that would do that.
Mhm.
And maybe Indian sweat lodges can do that too, maybe.
I've done that too.
So what do you think of Indian sweat lodges?
It's definitely an induced altered state. How it's done is you're in there and you'll go for about 20 minutes and there's chanting and people in various stages of undress. Not but it's very dark. It's completely pitch black, and then the flap opens and fresh cool air comes in at night, and then there's this wave and you're almost back to reality, but then it closes. There's definitely an altered state of some sort that comes out of that. I think in that, I remember I took a class at Cal State Long Beach called Mind Controller Freedom.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was this, that oftentimes in brainwashing, there's this idea of like an unfreezing event, to shake people enough to unfreeze them. And I think that some of those experiences definitely have that a tendency. Also, perhaps love. I think love can be unfreezing, even in its dissolution. There's this, if it's handled properly, there can be a real breaking open and a learning that can happen.
Yeah, certainly kind of like an experience or a period of lovingness. I was also thinking about kind of like if someone saves someone, if you save someone's life.
Mm, yeah, those archetypal kind of experiences, kind of from a Jungian perspective.
Yeah. All right. More to come next Friday.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Very well.